They said she had the kind of beauty that could stop a heartbeat. And maybe that's exactly what it did. In the frozen wilderness of Alaska, a man's body was found shot, dumped, and left to rot in the snow. His name was Kent Leppink. Days before he died, he wrote a letter to his parents. It said, "If anything happens to me, look at Mechele. Mechele Linehan, exotic dancer, fiancée, dream girl." To the outside world, she was glamorous and magnetic. But to the detectives, she was something else, the spider at the center of a web of lust, money, and betrayal. She wasn't just dating Kent. She was seeing two other men, and one of them helped her take out $1 million insurance policy on her fiancé's life. 10 years later, police came knocking. And when they did, Mechele didn't flinch. She smiled. She told them I loved him. I would never hurt him. But the evidence whispered otherwise. Letters, lease, and a Hollywood movie about a woman who kills for money that looked a little too familiar. They called her the Black Widow of Alaska. But was she a cold-blooded killer? Or the perfect pawn in someone else's deadly game? Stay until the end because this story proves one thing. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon is love, classification, justice, miscarriage, characteristics, love triangle, number of victims. 0, date of murder, May 2nd, 1996. Date of arrest, October 2006, 10 years after date of birth. October 12, 1972, victim profile, Kent Leppink, 36, her former fiancé. Method of murder, shooting location, Hope. Kenai Peninsula, Borough, Alaska, USA. Status, sentenced to 99 years in prison on April 2, 2008. The Alaska Court of Appeals overturned Linehan's conviction on February 5, 2010. Anchorage Superior Court dismissed the murder indictment against Linehan on December 13, 2011, death of Kent Leppink. Kent Leppink died by gunshot in 1996. His former fiancée, Mechele Linehan, was convicted of murdering him, but the judgment was reversed on appeal. After originally being sentenced to 99 years in prison, Linehan is currently free on bail awaiting a new trial. Kent Leppink's murder. Kent Leppink was a Michigan native who moved to Alaska to work as a fisherman. He met Linehan at a striptease club. Between 1994 and 1996, Linehan was romantically involved with Leppink and a man named John Carlin at the same time. For several months, the three lived in the same house in Anchorage, but on May 2, 1996, Leppink, age 36, was found dead in Hope, Alaska, with 3 .44 caliber bullet gunshot wounds. Linehan was arrested over 10 years later in October 2006 and convicted of his murder, but the verdict was overturned. Trial and appeal. At trial, Linehan was accused of conspiring with John Carlin to kill Leppink. The government said that Linehan's motive was that she was the beneficiary of Leppink's $1 million life insurance policy. Leppink changed the beneficiary on the policy a few days before his death. On October 22, 2007, Linehan was convicted of murder. On April 2, 2008, she was sentenced to 99 years and transferred to Highland Mountain Correctional Center in Eagle River, Alaska. Carlin had also been convicted of murder in April 2000. He was found bludgeoned to death in his cell at the Spring Creek Correctional Center in Seward, Alaska, on October 27, 2008. His conviction was set aside on December 12, 2008 because he died before he could complete his appeal. On February 5, 2010, the Alaska Court of Appeals overturned Linehan's conviction. The court concluded it was improper for the trial court to allow 2 pieces of evidence into the trial testimony about the movie The Last Seduction and a letter written by Leppink in the days before he died. The letter which Leppink wrote to his parents said, Linehan, Carlin, or Scott Hilke were probably responsible if he died under suspicious circumstances. Until May 11, 2010, Linehan was incarcerated at Highland Mountain Correctional Center in Eagle River. On April 28, 2010, a judge set as a condition of her bail a $250,000 appearance bond. On May 11, 2010, an East Coast corporate executive, Brian C. Watt from Chester Springs, Pennsylvania, donated the money necessary to release Linehan from prison, paying a $25,000 bail bondsman fee. On December 13, 2011, Anchorage Superior Court Judge Philip Volland dismissed the murder indictment against Linehan. In his ruling, Volland wrote, "The Court of Appeals repeatedly stated that the letter from the grave appreciably affected the jury's verdict at Linehan's trial. If it did so at a trial where the evidence was contested, defense counsel present, and the jury given an even stronger limiting instruction on the use of the letter, this court cannot find that Betsy Leppink's repetition of Kent Leppink's accusatory statement in the letter was not a decisive factor in the grand jury's decision to indict. Therefore, the indictment should be dismissed." On August 6, 2012, Alaska prosecutors announced they would not indict Linehan again. Media reporting. On July 27, 2008, Linehan's case was profiled on Dateline NBC. An update aired on May 22, 2009. In 2009, Linehan's case was profiled on the Oxygen Network series Snapped. Also in 2009, Linehan's case was profiled on Investigation Discovery on the series 48 Hours on ID. The episode was named Love and Death in Alaska. Linehan's case was also profiled in 2009 as part of the E! Network program Fatal Beauty 15 Most Notorious Women. Prosecutors won't seek new murder trial for Linehan. Appeals court in 2010 tossed murder conviction against the former dancer, August 6 to 12. Prosecutors will not seek a new trial against accused murderer Mechele Linehan. Attorneys from the Office of Special Prosecutions and Appeals said Monday. For Linehan, the announcement ends uncertainty in a case that has stretched on for more than 5 years. Linehan was a 23-year-old dancer at the Great Alaskan Bush Company when her then-fiancé Kent Leppink was found shot to death in a wooded area near Hope in 1996. She had left Alaska, moved to Washington, married, and started a family when she was indicted for conspiring to kill Leppink in 2006. Prosecutors said she manipulated John Carlin III, a former lover, into killing Leppink. Both men thought they were engaged to Linehan, according to prosecutors' version of events. In 2007, a jury found her guilty of murder. Carlin was convicted in a separate trial and sentenced to 99 years. He was later beaten to death in prison. Linehan served 2.5 years in prison before the Alaska Court of Appeals overturned her conviction in 2010, according to her attorney Cynthia Strout. The appeals court found that a letter Leppink wrote days before his death to his parents implicating Linehan should not have been allowed as evidence against her. After the first trial was overturned, prosecutors sought to again try Linehan for murder under the same indictment. In August 2011, Linehan filed a motion asking the court to dismiss the indictment, saying that the same letter found inadmissible by the appeals court had been presented to the grand jury that indicted her. In December of 2011, Anchorage Superior Court Judge Philip Volland sided with Linehan, granting her motion and dismissing the indictment for first-degree murder. At that point, prosecutors were left to decide whether they should attempt to present the case to a grand jury again without the letter, said Assistant Attorney General Paul Miovas. They ultimately decided the answer was no, Miovas said. "We just don't feel like we have sufficient evidence to prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt," he said. Another factor, he said, was that some witnesses who were key to the case are now deceased or otherwise unavailable, he said. Miovas said prosecutors had talked with Leppink's family about the decision. "They are disappointed, but understand the decision we have to make," he said. Linehan reached by phone in Washington, where she has been living with her family since January, when a Superior Court judge dismissed bail and court-ordered conditions keeping her in Alaska, directed questions to her attorney. Strout released a statement on behalf of Linehan saying that the first prosecution team hid important exculpatory evidence before the original trial. "The new prosecution team made the right decision now to end things," the statement said. Strout also noted that Linehan spent 5 years away from her family during the time she was prosecuted, incarcerated, or limited by the bail conditions during her appeal. Linehan wouldn't have anything else to say, Monday, Strout said. "She's soaking it all in." Stranger puts up bail, Linehan leaves prison. May 13, 2010. After spending 2.5 years in prison on a murder conviction that has since been thrown out, Mechele Linehan was released on bail Tuesday night when an East Coast businessman donated $25,000 to get her out. Brian Watt, a chief financial officer from Chester Springs Pay, gave the bail money because he believes Linehan is innocent and he wants the process to play itself out with a new trial. He said he expects nothing in return. He didn't want to give too many details about himself, but said, "In the simplest sense, I'm an analyst. I build predictive models of consumer behavior for a living. I analyze complex situations for a living, and my conclusion is she is innocent. 100% he wrote in an email. A new trial for Linehan 37 has been set for September, but it likely will be delayed to give her new defense team time to prepare. Linehan's bail conditions say she must stay in the Anchorage area and essentially be under house arrest until her trial. She is allowed outside for 2 4-hour time periods a week. She will not be allowed to return to her home in Olympia Wash. And she must always be in sight or sound of one her court-appointed third parties." Watt has never met the Linehans or been to Alaska, he said. He became interested in the case after watching a TV show about it. He then started researching it. "The narrative that was being told in the media, on blogs, and reader commentary on the internet took on a life of its own," he said. "It appeared to me to be impossible for Mrs. Linehan to escape that pre-assembled story. That story, as told by the Alaska State Troopers and prosecutor Pat Gullifson, follows a Hollywood narrative of a femme fatale. It's a storyline that resonated with jurors and led them to convict Linehan in 2007. But part of that narrative also led a higher court to overturn that conviction. The Alaska Court of Appeals concluded the judge improperly allowed the jury to hear some evidence that was subject to different interpretations and was hardly overwhelming. The prosecution's version of events outshined the truth both in the courtroom and outside it," Watt said. "It was as if the internet hyenas had gathered at the watering hole and they were going to rip the flesh from her bones no matter what she said or did," Watt said. After the appeals court overturned the conviction this year, Superior Court Judge Philip Volland set Linehan's bail at $250,000. But Linehan and her family had trouble coming up with the cash. To get a bail bondsman to put up the money, he charges a 10% fee, or $25,000 in this case. Watt's donation paid that fee. Separately, Anchorage strip club owner and businessman Terry Stallman offered his Big Timber Motel as the collateral for the bail, filling a requirement of the bondsman, in addition to the $25,000 paid by Watt to have collateral before he posted the $250,000. Volland last week rejected Stallman's proposal to go around a bail bondsman and put up only the property as bond, not cash. By offering the motel as collateral now, Stallman still risks losing it if she runs. Watt asked if this was the first time he had done something like this, said it wasn't but would not elaborate. I guess I could have saved all the money I spent over the years on these type of projects and retired early, but I never wanted to retire anyway, so it's all good, the 47-year-old said. Linehan was convicted in 2007 of murdering Kent Leppink in 1996. During the trial, prosecutors told a tale of the then 23-year-old Linehan convincing 39-year-old John Carlin to do the shooting. She was sentenced to 99 years in prison, the same sentence Carlin got. Their appeals court ruling essentially turns back the clock to when Linehan was presumed innocent until proven guilty. Linehan says she doesn't know who was behind the shooting. She and Carlin believe troopers botched the investigation. Lacking a murder weapon and other concrete evidence, prosecutors used circumstantial evidence to win the 2007 conviction. Damaging testimony included Carlin's son saying he saw his father washing a gun, the same make as the murder weapon. Carlin from prison later said he did clean a gun because he was worried someone planted it in his house, and he didn't want troopers blaming him for the murder. Court overturns Linehan conviction. February 6, 2010. The Alaska Court of Appeals on Friday overturned the murder conviction of Mechele Linehan, leaving it to state prosecutors to decide whether to retry the former Anchorage stripper. The appeals court opinion concluded Superior Court Judge Philip Volland, who presided at Linehan's 2007 trial, never should have allowed the jury to hear testimony about the movie The Last Seduction. The court also said a letter written by victim Kent Leppink in the days before he died should not have been allowed in. The letter, which Leppink wrote to his parents, said Linehan was a likely culprit if he ended up dead. The state's case against Linehan was circumstantial, and the evidence was subject to different interpretations and was hardly overwhelming, wrote Appeals Chief Judge Robert Coates. We accordingly conclude that Linehan's conviction must be reversed. Leppink, a 36-year-old commercial fisherman from a well-to-do family, was found shot to death in Hope in 1996. Linehan and John Carlin III, the alleged triggerman, were arrested on murder charges in 2006. Both were convicted in separate trials in Anchorage, and Volland sentenced both to 99 years in prison. Defense attorneys argued the trial was a witch hunt where Linehan's character was judged, not her guilt or innocence. Linehan, now 37, admitted that she was reckless with people and manipulative in her relationships with men when she was in her early 20s, but said that did not make her a killer. At Linehan's trial, prosecutor Pat Gullifson claimed Linehan tried to emulate the lead character of The Last Seduction in plotting to kill Leppink. The appeals judges said the evidence never should have been allowed for several reasons, including that the circumstances of Leppink's death were not similar to the 1994 noir thriller. Many law-abiding people are drawn to characters in literature or in the cinema who are villainous or roguish, even though they would not dream of engaging in the same crimes or misdeeds, Judge David Mannheimer wrote in the 3-0 decision. Leppink letter sealed a decision. It was the accusatory letter from Leppink to his parents that was the most damaging, the judges said. The judges would have overturned Linehan's conviction on the basis of the letter alone, Mannheimer wrote. Linehan's appeal lawyers Jeff Feldman, Susan Orlansky, and former Alaska Supreme Court Justice Alex Briner also tried to convince the appeals court that allowing evidence about Linehan's job as a Bush Company stripper unfairly biased the jury. The court rejected that claim, saying they read the entire trial transcript and Gullifson did not use Linehan's one-time job against her. Rather, he used it to explain how she met Leppink and Carlin. The district attorney can choose to take the case to the Alaska Supreme Court, retry it, or set free Linehan, who has spent the years since her conviction at Highland Mountain Correctional Center in Eagle River. Deputy Attorney General Rick Svobodny said Friday morning he had not yet read the 55-page opinion and would decide on a course of action later. Linehan's alleged co-conspirator Carlin was killed at the Spring Creek Correctional Center in a seemingly unrelated slaying, but no one has been charged with his death. He also said he was innocent and was appealing his decision. Because he died before he could complete his appeal, the appellate court on that technicality set aside his conviction in late 2008, according to a footnote in the appeal decision. Prosecutors say the motive in the slaying was Leppink's $1 million life insurance policy payout. Linehan never got the money, though, because Leppink changed the policy's beneficiary in the days before his death, prosecutors said. Linehan, who has always insisted she was innocent, admitted to being manipulative in her relationship with Leppink, but said she had nothing to do with his death. She said she tried to cancel the life insurance policy. Linehan, Carlin, and Leppink were friends involved in a complicated love triangle while they lived in Carlin's South Anchorage house when Leppink was killed. Carlin had already been convicted by the time Linehan went to trial. Her defense strategy at the trial was that Carlin acted on his own. She has said, though, that she doesn't know who killed Leppink. At the trial, prosecutors built their case on testimony and evidence that Linehan toyed with Leppink's emotions, may have had more than one boyfriend at a time, and shared life insurance policies with Leppink. They also say she acted guilty afterward by helping Carlin wash a gun. Whether that happened is disputed. Linehan was at one time a beneficiary on Leppink's life insurance policy. He was also the beneficiary on hers, although the insurance agency would not insure her for $1 million, as she and Leppink had wanted. The company insured her life for only $150,000. It was disputed at trial as to whether she thought that beneficiary status was active or not at the time of Leppink's death. In Leppink's letter written before he was killed, he told his parents that Linehan had a split personality and that the part he fell in love with is very beautiful. But Leppink also told his parents to take Mechele down and to make sure she is prosecuted. He told them to make sure she gets burned. Volland allowed the jury to consider the letter because it demonstrated how obsessed Leppink was with Linehan, and it showed how easily manipulated he was because of that infatuation, he said at the trial. But Linehan's lawyers never disputed that Leppink was crazy about their client. The victim's state of mind was not at issue, the appeals court judges concluded. There was already plenty of evidence that Leppink acted like he was obsessed. They noted he knew about Linehan's other relationships with men and still pursued her, followed her and a boyfriend to Louisiana, and served them coffee in bed and collected information about the boyfriend. While Volland concluded that Leppink's statement that Linehan had a split personality was a kind of comment that people in relationships often make about each other, and that it didn't reflect badly on Linehan. The appeals judges said, that's not true. Conviction a big win for state. The problem with allowing a murdered victim's testimony in a trial through such a letter is that it is emotional testimony for jurors to hear, and it doesn't allow the defense to question the witness about what is being said. It is almost inevitable that the jurors would view Leppink's assertions as at least circumstantial proof of the matters asserted, the appeals court wrote. In other words, the jurors would suspect that Leppink probably knew what he was talking about. The court said this type of unfair prejudice is most damaging in a case based entirely on circumstantial evidence like Linehan's. The state's ability to secure a guilty verdict hinged on convincing the jury to view a large number of ambiguous facts in the light most favorable to Linehan's guilt. In this situation, the evidence of Leppink's posthumous accusations may well have been the weight that tipped the jury's decision. Mannheimer wrote, the appeals court said the evidence about the letter from the grave and the movie had no direct relevance to the events being litigated, but strongly suggested that Linehan was the kind of person who would conspire to have Leppink murdered, Mannheimer wrote. The judges said that tainted the jury. The Linehan conviction was a significant win for the then recently formed cold case unit of the Alaska State Troopers. Leppink's murder was one of the first cases for which it made arrests. The Linehan case garnered national attention because prosecutors painted her as a manipulative, seductive, money-hungry stripper. But her friends and family say she is nothing like that and only worked as a dancer for a little while in her early 20s to earn money for college. She went on to marry a doctor, have a family, and earn a master's degree in public administration. She has no other criminal convictions. Linehan will remain in state custody until the case is sent back to the Superior Court for processing. The state will have to say whether they intend to hold another trial or petition the Supreme Court, which can choose not to hear the case. The Leppink family could not be immediately reached for comment. Mechele was both pleased and full of appropriate questions about what happens next, Orlansky said, of her client's reaction to the news when she received it in prison Friday morning. Linehan's husband, Colin Linehan, reached Friday morning, said he was just trying to take in the information and enjoy the day. There is still a long road ahead for him and his family, he said. Linehan sentenced to 99 years April 3, 2008. Just before a judge sentenced her to 99 years in prison, former stripper Mechele Linehan fought back tears and spoke for the first time in court. She pleaded for leniency, telling the judge she is not the monster the prosecution says she is. I have not lived a life of greed manipulation or that of a fictional character of a Hollywood movie, said the 35-year-old who was convicted of murdering for money. She described herself as a happy wife and mother to a young daughter, someone who enjoys renovating her old Olympia wash home and having homemade pizza parties. I beg you from the bottom of my heart to allow me the chance to go back to my family, she said. But Superior Court Judge Philip Volland was clearly not persuaded. He sided with the prosecution and handed down the maximum sentence, saying, Linehan's young daughter won't likely be seeing her mother outside of a prison until she is well into her own adulthood. Linehan will be first eligible for parole in 33 years. Volland called the 1996 murder of fisherman Kent Leppink a heinous crime. He said Linehan, who was convicted in October of orchestrating the murder, was a cold-hearted killer. The homicide was an unsolved case that languished with the Alaska State Troopers for 10 years before Linehan and a former boyfriend, John Carlin III, were arrested in 2006. Prosecutor Pat Gullifson said Linehan conspired with Carlin to dupe Leppink into believing she loved him, got him to make her the beneficiary of a life insurance policy, and then had Carlin kill him. Both Linehan and Carlin say they are innocent. Carlin was sentenced in January to 99 years for firing the handgun that killed Leppink. In my mind, I can find no principled distinction between the puppet who pulls the trigger and the puppeteer who pulls the strings, Volland said of Linehan's role. And in my judgment, Ms. Linehan was the puppeteer who pulled the strings. The victim's mother, Betsy Leppink, said outside the courtroom after the sentencing, "I feel that God has a way of answering crimes." She held hands with her husband and said, "Though that the sentence does not bring the closure the family needs. Only if we could walk home with our son could it be over." The two Mecheles. The sentencing came after more than a day and a half of testimony and arguments by the defense and prosecution. A nationally renowned forensic psychiatrist testified that Linehan likely did not commit the crime given that she exhibited no signs of maniacal personality disorders or of someone who had recovered from the trauma of a murder. Other family members and friends testified or wrote letters on her behalf describing her as a caring community volunteer who is known for taking in stray animals and helping the homeless and elderly. They said there was no need to rehabilitate Linehan in prison. She already has a magnanimous young heart, her mother-in-law Judy Linehan said in court. Volland concluded, though, that there are like two Linehans wrapped into one. One Linehan people are clearly charmed by, while the other is manipulative and seductive, he said. After the proceeding, Dr. Colin Linehan, Mechele's husband, who has been tirelessly supportive since she was arrested, agreed that there are two Mechele Linehans. There's the Mechele that everyone who knows her and has been around her for years knows, and the Mechele that the prosecution invented their narrative. When Volland stated his reasons for his decision, Colin Linehan, sitting directly behind his wife, often shook his head or quietly laughed at what the judge was saying. Outside the courtroom, he said he and his wife will appeal vigorously the decisions by Judge Volland during the trial. Volland said he will recommend that Linehan serve her time nearer her family in Washington. Poor choices. In her 5-minute statement to the judge, Mechele Linehan said that when she worked as a dancer at the Great Alaskan Bush Company, she made poor choices. She admitted that she accepted gifts and money from men including Leppink, whom she met at the bar. In previous interviews, Linehan has said that Leppink was a customer of hers at the Bush Company whom she befriended. He became obsessed with her, though, and fabricated a relationship in his head. He lied to his friends and family about them, she says. She says it was his idea to take out the life insurance, but both of them tried to cancel it days before his death. She says she doesn't know who killed Leppink. At the time of his death, Leppink was broke obsessed with Linehan and had lost a considerable amount of weight, his family has said. In the end, Leppink changed the beneficiary of his life insurance policy to his family. They got the money. Carlin said at his sentencing in January that he wondered if Leppink orchestrated his own murder in a way to falsely implicate the people around him whom he wanted to punish. Carlin questioned whether it was a last act of revenge against the woman who rejected him, and against Carlin, who protected Linehan from Leppink by lying about her whereabouts. In the decade after Leppink's death, Linehan went on to marry a physician, have a daughter earn a master's degree in public administration, and open a cosmetic laser treatment center in Olympia. Linehan will first be eligible for parole when she is 68 years old. 68 years old. Ex-stripper convicted in fiancé's death. October 22, 2000. Anchorage, Alaska. A stripper-turned-soccer mom accused of borrowing from a movie plot to kill her fiancé for money was convicted Monday of first-degree murder. Mechele Linehan, 35, had been charged with conspiring with another man she hoped to marry to kill Kent Leppink, who was shot 3 times in 1996 on an isolated trail 90 minutes outside Anchorage. Linehan had no visible reaction. The verdict was read. Judge Philip Volland allowed her to hug her husband Colin Linehan before she was led from the courtroom in handcuffs. Linehan's other former fiancé, John Carlin III, was convicted of Leppink's murder in April and will be sentenced in November. Her sensational trial was full of tawdry details about her lifestyle and accusations about how she manipulated men she met while dancing at the Great Alaskan Bush Company strip club in Anchorage. Prosecutors had little direct evidence but tried to prove that Linehan was in on planning Leppink's murder to cash in on a $1 million insurance policy, not realizing Leppink had removed her as the beneficiary just days before his death. This person manipulated the circumstances with her guile and deception. Prosecutor Pat Gullifson had told the Superior Court jury, all she needed was someone to kill him. Kevin Fitzgerald, Linehan's attorney, said that much of the evidence presented by prosecutors was designed to do nothing but smear Mrs. Linehan. Conjecture, speculation, suspicion, innuendo, even gossip. This is the package the state has presented to you, Fitzgerald had told the jury. The package is empty. Prosecutors had claimed Linehan, then known as Mechele Hughes, was following the plot of the 1994 movie The Last Seduction, in which a femme fatale coaxes her lover into killing her husband. A former stripper, Laura Aspiotis, testified that she watched the movie with Linehan and that Linehan admired the tough-talking lead character played by Linda Fiorentino. She told me that the character was her heroine and that she wanted to be just like her, Aspiotis said. Leppink's body was found by utility workers on the ground near a lonely trail in Hope. He had been shot 3 times with a .44 Magnum. Prosecutors say Linehan and Carlin lured him to the desolate mining community by fabricating a series of emails that Leppink found saying Linehan was holed up in a cabin. The cabin didn't exist. According to prosecutors, Linehan wanted the proceeds from Leppink's life insurance policy. But what she didn't know was that Leppink suspected evil afoot and made his parents the beneficiaries days before he was murdered. He sent a letter to his parents to be opened if something fishy happened to him. "Since you're reading this, you assume that I'm dead," he wrote, and then named Linehan Carlin and another man who hoped to marry Linehan as possible suspects. "Make sure she is prosecuted," he wrote. Still, prosecutors did not have the evidence to make an arrest at the time. Linehan left stripping and, over the next decade, married a doctor, got a psychology degree from St. Martin's University, had a daughter, and worked for a time as an administrative assistant at the Washington State Executive Ethics Board, which guards against ethical misconduct by state employees. She was living in Olympia, Wash, when she was arrested. The Alaska State Troopers Cold Case Unit caught a break in 2005 when officials interviewed Carlin's son, who was underage in 1996 and wasn't allowed by his father to be interviewed. As an adult, he gave investigators enough damning testimony to bring charges against his father and Linehan last year. He told them that he saw his father using bleach to wash out a handgun in a bathroom sink and that Linehan watched. Linehan's sentencing was set for January. In 2008, Mechele Linehan was sentenced to 99 years in prison. The jury saw a manipulative woman who used men like chess pieces and left one of them dead. But fate wasn't done with her story. Years later, a court overturned her conviction. The letter from Kent thrown out as illegal evidence. Without it, the case fell apart. And Mechele walked free. No tears, no apologies, just that same calm smile she wore the day she was arrested. To this day, no one knows who killed Kent Leppink. Some say justice failed, others say it finally worked. Was she guilty, or was she the victim of her own beauty, punished for being the kind of woman people love to hate? One thing's certain, the truth is buried somewhere in the Alaskan snow. And the only person who really knows what happened that night isn't talking. If you think you can tell the difference between innocence and evil, you haven't met Mechele Linehan. Subscribe for more stories where love turns lethal and beauty becomes a weapon.